of pseudoscience must start with the so-called demarcation problem. Indeed, without a proposed solution to the demarcation problem, valid or invalid, explicit or implicit, the term pseudoscience has no real meaning. If there were a universally recognized and workable demarcation criterion, as one calls a solution to the demarcation problem, then the task of this book would be simple. Those doctrines that passed the test would be science, and those that failed would be pseudoscience. Alas, the demarcation problem has to date eluded resolution. There are good reasons to think that it will remain a puzzle, which means that debates about what counts as pseudoscience will always be with us. In fact, we have wrestled with the problem of demarcation for as long as domains of knowledge about the natural world have claimed authoritative status. One of the oldest medical writings in the Western tradition, the 5th century BCE Hippocratic text, On the Sacred Disease, is essentially a demarcation document about how to understand and treat what we now call epilepsy. In the text, the author, conventionally called Hippocrates, though these documents were likely composed by a variety of authors over a sizable span of time, lambastes the sort of people we now call witch doctors, faith healers, quacks, and charlatans. Instead, Hippocrates provides his own theory of the cause of epilepsy and explains why no faith healer deserves the title of physician. Every claim to scientific authority necessarily implies the exiling of rivals from it. The basic formulation of the demarcation problem is, how should we distinguish science from pseudoscience? Yet, there are really several demarcation problems. There is the core question of epistemology. How do you sift correct knowledge from incorrect claims? Beyond that, you also might want to differentiate science from all those domains, art, history, theology, gardening, that are non-science, or from those things that look an awful lot like science, but for some reason do not quite make it. This last set, the imposters, are frequently designated pseudosciences. Any demarcation criterion worthy of the name ought to be able to distinguish science from them. The term demarcation problem was coined by the philosopher Karl Popper, and his demarcation criterion remains the most commonly invoked among scientists, philosophers, and those undergraduates who have views on this subject. We will start, then, with the philosopher and his criterion of falsifiability, before elaborating why the criterion fails. Karl Popper and falsifiability. Karl Popper was born just after the turn of the 20th century in Vienna, then the capital of the sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire. By the time he received his doctorate in psychology, not, interestingly, in philosophy, in 1928, he was living in the same city but a very different country, the much smaller Republic of Austria. Vienna was home to a vibrant and contentious socialist movement, so he was exposed early on to Marxism, but was quickly disillusioned. This was also the birthplace of psychoanalysis, and Popper in the early 1920s volunteered in the clinics of Alfred Adler, who had split from his former mentor, the creator of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. Precocious interest in both theoretical frameworks and his subsequent rejection of them were crucial in the later formulation of Popper's philosophy of science. Philosophy of science was a big deal in Popper's Vienna, and the decade when he was a student saw the flourishing of a group of philosophers called the Vienna Circle. This group elaborated the dominant philosophy of science of the first half of the 20th century, logical empiricism. Not only did the Vienna Circle and its like-minded peers in Berlin dominate European philosophy of science, but after the rise of National Socialism, many of the leading lights, who were either Jewish or socialist or both, emigrated to the United States, where they re-established their school of thought. Popper, though not a member of the Vienna Circle, was likewise thrust into globetrotting for similar reasons. Although baptized as a Lutheran and a member of a middle-class family, all of his grandparents were Jewish, clouding his future as the annexation of Austria to Hitler's Germany loomed in 1938. Popper emigrated to New Zealand a year before that event, and in 1946 moved to London. Logical empiricism can be usefully understood by examining its component terms. Its advocates are empiricists, because they believe that sense data constitute our only reliable sources of information about the natural world. Building on